There are still a lot of questions to be answered about the Sixers offseason. As we know, currently it is just Joel Embiid, Connor Paul Reed, and Tyrese Maxey as the guys known to be coming back next year, and the rest of the roster is still a blank canvas to be painted. Well, one of the biggest questions and X factors for where will he land is De'Anthony Melton. This is a guy who has turned himself into quite a necessary part of this Sixers team since he was traded here, and he has hit the free agent market, which will be interesting to see how things play out. Now, we did get some concerning news on it about that he may be due for a more significant payday than the Sixers could be willing to pay. And the report here coming from Keith Pompey saying that assuming his back checks out during physicals, there's a sense that De'Anthony Melton will make more than the $8.6 million he averaged the last 4 seasons. The Sixers have a salary cap hold of $15.2 million on the soon-to-be unrestricted free agent. Bleacher Report predicts that the soon-to-be 26-year-old could garner around $60 million, presumably over 4 seasons, on his next deal as a lockdown defender in the prime of his career. Melton, defensive ace, excited to head in free agency after an injury-plagued season with the Sixers. So to dive into specifically what Bleacher Report wrote here, I did want to pull this up here, and they write that a double-digit scorer in each of the last 3 seasons, the 25-year-old Melton brings a lot of the same plug-and-play qualities as Caldwell Pope, but won't cost you nearly as much. Considering he's 5 years younger than KCP, you could make the case here that a $60 million contract would be a bargain to lock down what should be Melton's prime seasons. It's also convenient that a projected 4-year deal at the mid-level exception, which starts at $12.4 million with annual raises, should come in right around the $54 million mark. Melton only needs to beat that by a few $1,000,000, which shouldn't be hard to do. So De'Anthony Melton, there's a lot of areas I want to go with this conversation. The first and foremost I want to start with is the injury factor, because the back injury is something I'm legitimately concerned about. That we saw him battle it throughout the entirety of the season. To dive into it specifically, he only played 33 games this year, and this back injury has been something that is lingering. And more specifically, what is concerning with me, that when you go through how things played out this year, that he first tweaked the back, was out for an extended period of time, returned for, I think, 3 games, and then missed a longer extended period of time. He did battle, try to come back, compete in the playoffs. He ultimately was cleared and seemingly available, but Nick Nurse chose not to go in his direction, which I do get, as, you know, it had been a long time since he had played basketball, and throwing him into the playoffs is a tough position there. So the back injury is the first and foremost issue. Back injuries are tough, man. We've seen them ruin a lot of players' careers and a lot of human beings' just daily lives. You see people, when you have a back injury, that's something that impacts everything, every step, everything that you do, and especially makes it hard to play high-level basketball. The back injuries are not something that are new to De'Anthony Melton. In fact, he first started having them when he was with the Grizzlies in his rookie season. This is something that has been continually a part of him throughout his NBA career, and that's something that definitely has me concerned and afraid to shell out this type of money. Now, to dive into the stats specifically, he's a very good player. That I like De'Anthony Melton. I think his skill set works, and to give the specifics, that during his time with the Sixers, the 2 seasons that he has spent here, he's averaged 10.4 points per game, 2.7 assists, 3.9 rebounds, 1.6 steals per game, turned himself into a pretty good three-point shooter, shooting 37.9% from beyond the arc on 5.4 attempts per game. Overall, he shot 41.1% from the field. There are some fair criticism about his finishing around the rim. He does have a tendency to get out of control. For me, what the biggest concern is with Melton is I don't know if he's the ideal backcourt partner to Tyrese Maxey. And there was a period of time where he's certainly been an upgrade when thinking back to the initial trade where the Sixers sent the 23rd pick, which turned out to be David Roddy, and Danny Green to Memphis. That was a great trade, and Melton has absolutely played himself into an important part of the Sixers team. And when Tyrese Maxey first came into the league, I thought it was an important balance to have De'Anthony Melton next to him, as there was this Maxey being a little bit deficient on the defensive end, and Melton bringing that as a strength to try and balance things out. I think Tyrese Maxey has improved at the defensive end to a level where that is no longer necessary. And obviously in a best case scenario that all 5 guys on the floor are plus defenders, and you're not nitpicking this, but I do think that I'm not afraid to have Tyrese Maxey as guarding a team's high-powered guard that will score the basketball. I've seen him go toe-to-toe with Jaylen Brown, Jalen Brunson, you name it, that he will compete, and that is something that is even more encouraging for Maxey moving forward. Now, with De'Anthony Melton, the reason that I bring that up, it is his size, that he measures in at just 6'3", and while he does have a long wingspan that allows him to guard guys slightly bigger than him, I just don't know if he's the answer. That when you're really thinking about constructing the Sixers team to actually bring them to a championship level, you have to factor in matchups. And do you feel comfortable with De'Anthony Melton being the type of guy to guard a Jason Tatum or a Jaylen Brown? I just don't feel that way, and that's why I think this money could be better utilized elsewhere. Now, if De'Anthony Melton, if the market is not there, if the rest of the NBA is afraid of this back issue, I absolutely have no problem bringing him back on a prove it type deal. And Melton does seem a little bit open to a return as well. There was a quote that he had here when asked that he said, "I would love to come back to the Sixers, but it's not up to me, and I understand that. It is what it is, and I understand that it's a business, so I'll roll with whatever." So kind of keeping his card as close to the vest here. My general sense of Melton is that he did genuinely enjoy his time in Philadelphia. He does seem to have a pretty strong relationship with Tyrese Maxey and a couple other members of the team. He's a guy that I like. I think he's a good NBA player, a plus NBA player, and as long as that back will allow him to stay on the court, then I think that the future is bright from him. But I think that's a bigger risk than something to just brush off as a little footnote here. And I do expect him to get a raise this year, that to dive into what his contract has been throughout his career, that this year making just $8 million is pretty crazy based on the level of production that he was giving the Sixers team. I do love that he was on a descending contract as well. That is something that I would love to see Daryl Morey continue to utilize. You see guys like Jalen Brunson having the benefits of that as their number goes down. You shell out, they front load it. It's much more cap friendly and allows you to maneuver a little bit differently. Melton has that and not quite as much of a drop off as some others for him specifically, but still something to note there. I do want to give credit to him as far as the shooting. That the three-point shooting specifically is what made De'Anthony Melton such an important part of this team, that he was able to bring that balance where he is this plus defender and he's still willing to let it fly. And when you think of the Matisse Thybulles of the world and all these guys that we have rotated through and tried to make work, Jalen McDaniels, players like that, Melton did put it together in a way that we have not seen other teams. But it's still a risk for what is next for this guy. I do think my general sense of De'Anthony Melton, I think he's likely to get overpaid by a team needing that skill set, that when you have these switchable athletic guards, the guys that we've coveted to bring into the Sixers team, teams are going to want them. And while Melton is not quite the carbon copy of what I'm picturing when talking about these things, I think his size, the 6'3" height, is really something that concerns me. Because when you talk about these switchable, quick twitch athletes, the wings that you do want, you want a little bit more size there. You want a guy that is like 6'7", 6'8", somewhere in that range where they can go toe to toe with the OG Anunobis of the world, the Jason Tatums, the Jaylen Browns, the guys that are the real deal high level wings at the NBA level. That is more what I'm looking for and what I think it is more worth pouring assets into and pouring money into than it is to go out of your way to re-sign De'Anthony Melton. So if this is the end of his Sixers career, I am grateful for the time that De'Anthony Melton spent here. I do like him. He will be a fan favorite of mine and a guy that I'll be rooting for from afar if he does land. And if he is back, if the market is dried up, and that there does need to be a prove-it deal, I do still believe De'Anthony Melton can contribute to this Sixers team. That I do think his skill set is important. I do think he is talented enough to earn regular rotation minutes, but I do still think the honest assessment that is a championship-level team, De'Anthony Melton capable of being a starting caliber guard on, I don't quite think that is the case. I think he's a good player, a high-level role player, a guy that can play rotational minutes on a high-level team, but I think that maybe he's in a slightly bigger role than the Sixers need or can't quite fill the level of role the Sixers are asking from him based on who he is as a basketball player. So we'll see how things shake out from here. Obviously, a lot more to answer, and I'm sure Daryl Morey is going to be zeroed in on some of the bigger fish before settling in for what's going on with De'Anthony Melton. But ultimately, we're seeing the value of a well-rounded team right in front of our eyes in these playoffs. When you see teams like the Pacers and like the Timberwolves, where Anthony Edwards can shoot 6 for 24 in a game, and the Timberwolves still find a way to take down the defending champs. Having a top-to-bottom team is important, and if that means you have to let De'Anthony Melton go to bring in a couple more well-rounded players, you absolutely do that 10 times out of 10. So we'll see what the numbers are looking like. This very much, to me, is based on what that number is, what that value is, how much you are paying out. I like De'Anthony Melton, ultimately would like him back, but certainly am not willing to overpay to make sure that he sticks around. But I do want to hear from you guys. Do you feel the same way as me? Drop your comments on your opinion of De'Anthony Melton. What do you think a potential contract could look for? When I say a prove-it deal, I probably mean closer to what he's currently making in that like $8 million range, would likely what I have in my mind. But we will see how things shake out with that. Appreciate you guys for tuning in again. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button to keep the Sixers Digest family growing. Dropping a like to let me know you're listening to any comments below. I'll be talking to you next time right here on Sixers Digest.